I never expected to see an FBI director's hands tremble, especially because of Pramila Jayapal. 4 minutes ago, in a packed House Judiciary Committee hearing room with cameras from every major network pointed at the witness table, the Congresswoman from Washington's 7th District asked a question so direct, so cutting, that Kash Patel's hands visibly trembled when he reached for his water glass. "Director Patel," she said, her voice calm but loaded with something dangerous. "How many names in the Epstein files did you personally redact? Not your staff, not the classification team. You." The room went silent. That kind of dead silence where you can hear the air conditioning hum because everyone in that room knew what that question really meant. Jayapal had proof. The folder was full of it. Patel knew it too. You could read it on his face. He was waiting in fear and panic. Let me back up. House Judiciary Committee Oversight Hearing, January 22, 2026. This was supposed to be a routine hearing. FBI budget discussions, cybersecurity updates, maybe some back and forth about immigration enforcement. Standard congressional theater. Republicans would praise Patel. Democrats would criticize him. Everyone would read their prepared statements and go home. But there were things nobody knew. Things only Pramila Jayapal knew. That is not what happened. Pramila Jayapal walked into that hearing room with a thin blue folder. I noticed it immediately because Jayapal doesn't usually bring props to hearings. She's known for her razor-sharp memory, her ability to quote testimony from months ago without looking at notes. The folder meant something specific, something everyone was meant to see, and it was documented. The first 2 hours went as expected. Republican members lobbed softball questions about FBI successes. Democratic members pressed on civil liberties concerns. Patel gave his practiced answers, that smooth bureaucratic tone that looks like transparency but says nothing. Then Jayapal got her turn. "Director Patel," she began, opening the blue folder with deliberate slowness. "I want to discuss the Epstein investigation files that were released last month." The temperature in the room dropped. Epstein questions always do that. But there was something different in how Jayapal said it. Not angry, not theatrical, just precise. Like a surgeon announcing where she's about to cut. Patel shifted slightly in his chair. "Congresswoman, as you know, we've committed to unprecedented transparency regarding those files. We released over 2,000 pages of previously classified material." "That's not what I asked." Jayapal's interruption was surgical. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't need to. "I asked about the files you redacted, not the files you released. The files you personally kept hidden." This is where it got interesting. Patel's 3 lawyers sitting directly behind him all leaned forward at exactly the same time. It was like watching a choreographed dance of panic. They knew something was coming. "Congresswoman," Patel said, his voice steady but his right hand moving toward the table edge, "I don't personally make redaction decisions on individual documents. That is handled by career classification specialists according to established protocols." Jayapal pulled out a single sheet of paper from her blue folder. She held it up just long enough for the cameras to see the FBI letterhead, the classification stamps, the official seal. "This is an internal FBI memorandum dated November 3, 2025. Subject line, Classification Review, Override Authority." She paused. "Let me read you something, Director." She put on her reading glasses. Jayapal never wears glasses in hearings. Never. The glasses meant she wanted everyone to know this was verbatim, documented, unfiltered truth. Quote, "Following review of the Epstein investigation document release, FBI Director Kash Patel has personally flagged 47 witness testimony files for permanent classification override. These files contain direct testimony naming individuals in positions of significant political and financial influence. Standard declassification protocols have been suspended pending the director's personal authorization." End quote. She looked up. "Signed by your Deputy Director of Counterterrorism." The room exploded. Not literally, but close. Journalists were frantically typing. Unexpected sounds erupted. Republican members looked at each other with expressions ranging from confusion to alarm. Patel's face went through 3 distinct changes in about 5 seconds. First, shock that she had the memo. Second, rapid calculation about how to respond. Third, something that looked a lot like fear. Congresswoman, that memo is being taken out of context. Then put it in context. Jayapal's voice was ice. Explain to me and to the American people watching why you personally blocked the release of 47 witness testimonies naming powerful individuals connected to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. 47 witnesses, Director. 47 people who came forward, who testified to the FBI, who gave names. And you decided the public doesn't get to know what they said. Patel tried to recover with bureaucratic language. The classification process involves complex considerations of national security, ongoing investigations, and witness protection protocols. I didn't ask about the process. Jayapal cut him off, never raising her voice, never needing to. I asked why you personally overrode the declassification. This memo says you flagged them. You suspended standard protocols. So I am asking directly, Director Patel, what are you hiding? The question hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot, because that's exactly what it was. A direct accusation, not implied, not suggested, stated, what are you hiding? Patel's mouth opened, closed, opened again. His lawyers weren't passing notes, they were frozen. This wasn't something rehearsed in prep sessions. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request a brief recess to gather the specific documents that would allow me to respond comprehensively to Congresswoman Jayapal's questions. Request denied. That was Jim Jordan, Republican chairman, Patel's supposed ally. The shock on Patel's face was visible even from the press gallery. If Congresswoman Jayapal has an FBI memo showing you personally blocked witness testimony releases, Jordan continued, I think we'd all like to hear your explanation right now. This is where Patel made his critical mistake. Instead of answering the question, he tried to turn it into a partisan attack. Congresswoman Jayapal, I find it concerning that there seems to be more interest in attacking the FBI's classification decisions than in supporting our ongoing work. Jayapal didn't let him finish. She pulled out another document. Director Patel, do you know what this is? This is a letter from the Department of Justice Inspector General dated December 15, 2025. She began reading. The Inspector General has reviewed FBI Director Patel's classification override decisions regarding Epstein investigation files. We have identified multiple instances where witness testimony was flagged for permanent classification despite containing no information that meets established criteria for national security exemption. She looked directly at Patel. The Inspector General reviewed your decisions, Director, and they found you violated your own classification standards. You blocked the release of testimony that had no legitimate national security justification. The room was chaos now. Democrats were demanding answers. Republicans were trying to figure out how to spin this, and Patel just sat there, visibly sweating under the committee room lights. Let me be specific, Jayapal continued, her voice cutting through the noise. Witness testimony file 2847A. A woman who worked at Epstein's New York residence in 2009. She named 7 individuals she personally witnessed at the property. None of those individuals work in intelligence. None have government security clearances. None pose any national security risk. Yet you classified her testimony as permanently restricted. Why? Patel's voice came out strained. I don't have the specific file details in front of me. I do, said Jayapal. She read slowly, making sure every word landed. The witness described seeing a prominent technology executive, a British royal family member, a Hollywood studio head, 2 hedge fund managers, and a former U.S. senator. She provided dates, descriptions, and stated she was prepared to testify in court. She paused. And you buried her testimony. Director, you made sure the American people would never see what she said. Not because of national security, because the people she named are too powerful to expose. That is not accurate. Patel's voice was barely steady. Then correct me. Tell me which part is inaccurate. Tell me why this woman's testimony needed to be permanently classified. Tell me who you are protecting. Silence. 20 full seconds of silence. In congressional hearings, 20 seconds is an eternity. It is a confession without words. Finally, Patel spoke. The classification decisions were made in consultation with multiple agencies, intelligence community partners, and regarding public disclosure, Jayapal interrupted with devastating precision. Director, I have the classification review notes right here. She held up another document. Your Deputy Director of Counterterrorism wrote, and I quote, Director Patel has personally reviewed witness files 2847A through 2893C and has determined that despite no intelligence equities, public release would create unacceptable political complications. She let that sink in. Political complications, Director, not national security threats, not intelligence risks. Political complications, that is why you buried 47 witness testimonies. Because the truth would be politically complicated. Patel tried one more deflection. Congresswoman, you are reading internal deliberative communications that don't reflect the final, they reflect exactly what happened. Jayapal's voice was sharp. You were appointed FBI director on the promise of transparency. You told the American people the Epstein files would be released. You stood before this committee and swore you'd expose the truth. And then you personally blocked 47 witnesses from being heard because they were politically complicated. The accusations were piling up now, one after another, each backed by documentary evidence pulled from that blue folder, and with each new document, Patel shrank a little more in his seat. But Jayapal wasn't finished. She pulled out one final sheet of paper, and this one changed everything. Director Patel, she said, her voice now carrying absolute moral authority. Do you recognize this name? She held up the paper. Maria Santos. She was 19 years old when she was trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein. She testified to the FBI in 2010. She named 6 men who assaulted her. 6 men she can identify, describe in detail, and is willing to testify against in court. Jayapal's voice cracked slightly. The first real emotion she had shown, you classified her testimony as permanently restricted. Maria Santos is now 34 years old. She has waited 15 years for justice. And you decided that the men she named were more important than her right to be heard. The room went absolutely still. Because this wasn't about bureaucracy anymore. This wasn't about classification protocols or political complications. This was about a woman who was trafficked as a teenager, and an FBI director who buried her testimony to protect her abusers. Director Patel, Jayapal said, I'm going to ask you one final question, and I want you to look at the cameras while you answer. Because Maria Santos is watching. Thousands of survivors are watching. The American people are watching. She paused. Why did you decide that protecting powerful men was more important than giving Maria Santos justice? Patel had nothing. No answer, no deflection, no bureaucratic escape hatch. He just sat there, hands trembling slightly. Face pale under the lights. Congresswoman, he started, but his voice failed. I think that answer tells us everything we need to know, Jayapal said quietly. She closed her blue folder and waited. Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions, but I do have a motion. I move that this committee subpoena all 47 witness testimony files that Director Patel personally classified, along with all communications regarding those classification decisions, and all records of FBI contact with the individuals named in those testimonies. The hearing devolved into procedural chaos. After that, motions and counter-motions. Parliamentary procedure. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the clip. The 4 minutes when Pramila Jayapal systematically dismantled Kash Patel's credibility using his own memos, his own classification decisions, his own words. Within an hour, the footage was everywhere. Jayapal exposes Patel's Epstein cover-up, trending worldwide. Conservative outlets were scrambling. Liberal outlets were calling for resignation. And somewhere, Maria Santos was finally being heard. The blue folder became a symbol. 47 witness testimonies. 47 survivors. 47 people who named their abusers. 47 files that Kash Patel buried and protected, not for national security. For political complications. I've watched Congress for years. I've seen tough questioning. I've seen explosive confrontations. But I've never seen anything quite like what Pramila Jayapal did in those 4 minutes. She didn't yell, she didn't perform, she didn't create sound bites. She just methodically, precisely, devastatingly proved that the FBI director lied. With documents, with names, with a 19-year-old trafficking victim who had waited 15 years for someone to care. Kash Patel walked out of that hearing knowing his career was over. Not because of partisan attacks, because a Democratic Congresswoman asked him to explain why he protected powerful predators instead of their victims. And he had no answer. 4 minutes, 47 files, 1 blue folder, and a question Patel couldn't answer. Why did you choose power over justice? The clip is still spreading. The subpoenas are being drafted, and Maria Santos finally has someone fighting for her. Sometimes accountability doesn't require hours of testimony or months of investigation. Sometimes it just requires one person willing to ask the questions nobody else will. Pramila Jayapal asked, and Kash Patel's silence answered.